Everyone, it's Shaun St-Amour, Mark Wille, Joe Konopacki, and we are here with Offsite Dirt High Performance Build, and we're going to talk more about the benefits. You've probably seen on earlier episodes, we've talked about comfort, we've talked about health. Now we're diving into these two images that we'll bring up shortly. And maybe, Mark, you want to say hello, and I'll fire up the images.
All right. So this is Mark Wille, and high performance build on Offsite Dirt. Hey, Joe, you want to introduce yourself, and then I'll roll into the topic?
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Shaun. Yeah, I'm Joe Konopacki with Insight Property Services, consulting company here in the Chicagoland area. So we're looking at homes that weren't built to passive house standards and helping people push people towards that direction as much as they can handle. So it's great to see homes get built to a higher standard, the passive house standard, right from the start. So tell us more about dust and bugs, Mark.
Perfect. So let's start with the first one there, the no dust, right? People like you and the rest of us here who live and work in typically rural and urban buildings, you guys know what we're talking about here, right? Dust has a way of filtering through those cracks, crevices in our walls. And what do? They start to accumulate on horizontal surfaces. Where else? Our lungs. Yeah. Our human filters are called lungs, right? So passive house construction that does its best to try and eliminate this problem. This thing we call the continuous air barrier, well, that stops it in its entirety, if it can, right? The dust from coming through this assembly, and it also takes care of filtering that outside air that's coming in from our heat and energy recovery ventilation system. So, Shaun, you pulled the graphic up, so you get to go first.
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting because we can get real nerdy with some building science things, because when we think about sitting in maybe that home that you're currently in, and you can see the dust particles flying around in the air, and you wonder, why is that happening? Why can I see the dust there? And that's, again, is you've got convection loops going on in your home. You've got some of the heating and cooling going on. And so all of a sudden that turbulence that you have in the air is bringing up the dust and other things. And so it's now transforming or transferring across a room. And it's probably, coming in a crack from the door. And then you've got these loops, and all of a sudden you've got dust in places that you didn't expect it to land. And but if you had an airtight building, meaning that you took the time to ensure that all the corners, all of the joints are nicely connected, again, various different options we've spoke of before about how we can make those buildings airtight. But once they're airtight, especially at doors and windows, you're not going to have those convection loops, because the home then has the filter fresh air, which ensures you're going to be sitting there in a comfortable 20 degrees Celsius or 70 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on where you are and what temperature device you're looking at. But yeah, you're going to be right against that window in the middle of the room or down a hallway, and you're going to be enjoying that comfortable temperature that you've set. And again, you're not going to have these loopy loops of dust spinning around.
Yeah, this summer was a big challenge with the Canadian wildfires kicking up all kinds of particulate in the air, and a lot of that sort of drifting down to us in the States here. And so we had quite a few clients that had kind of sensitive respiratory systems, and so they were literally kind of hiding inside the house. You saw the COVID masks come back out, to try to help minimize some of the particulate inhalation. And we'd have clients, asking us advice, how do we manage this? And I said, well, obviously you've got to create a better separation between you and the pollutant, and so an ERV is typically, exhausting stale air from the house and bringing in fresh air. But under certain circumstances, that fresh air that might be, lower in carbon dioxide might be higher in airborne particulates from things like wildfires or, many other sources. So, having a house that can effectively, separate inside air from outside air with a, air exchanger and filtration system in between there, is critical if you're trying to, maintain higher quality in your house.
When I think of that, I also think of, okay, so let's say it gets in, right? So let's say those measures aren't there. What materials and what exists in the space that will harbor it, that will actually make it stick around longer? And I think of some of the earlier times with lead in particular, they were very big on hard surfaces in space. And so if you have these concrete floors, these tile floors, these engineered finished wood flooring systems and court type things, these are quote unquote hard surfaces. So when the dust does come in there, it's a lot more difficult for it to accumulate. And also it's easier to keep clean, whether that's your vacuum system, repeated robotic controls that go out there now, or whether you sweep, mop. Swiffer is probably a trade term, but you get what I'm saying. Push it,
Wet mop,
collect it. Yeah,
little damp mop.
ShamWow it. And then so also the window areas, right? Another great source of leaks, if it quite possibly is the window unit itself or the connection of that window unit in the outside. And what do we put there? Well, a lot of time it's some sort of tapestry, a drape system, and the dust sits on there, or maybe it's a horizontal blind surface, and that stuff just peppered on there. Well, do you clean that every 6 hours? Well, it depends how OCD you are, but probably not. So those surfaces just hold it. And that's what I think about is, okay, say it's once it's in. Now, how does it get held and how often does it get removed? These filtration systems, these MERVs and these HEPAs, they do a lot, but so does elbow grease, right, guys?
Yeah. Again, weekend chores in the St-Amour household means we're vacuuming and sweeping to get rid of it. But if we were in a high performance home, we wouldn't have the need to be doing as much as it's required in these typical homes. I mean, I've got my indoor air quality monitor right now. I'm looking pretty good there. 91, it says on the dial. So luckily right now I've got the ocean wind that's making sure that we've got some good fresh air here in this home. But again, you talk about smoke and the weather changing, that thing quickly tells me what it's like. And so having these devices to make sure that we can verify things and change and adapt, open a window, all that kind of stuff. But again, when we don't have these airtight buildings, we're going to have dust, extra debris flying around. And most of the time, it's not the healthy stuff.
No, that's always the frustration when you talk to these old school builders and they say, you point out gaps and holes and such, and they're like, oh, that's fine. A house has to breathe. I'm like, you're making excuses, right? Because there's no way you can guarantee those gaps and holes are only letting out the bad stuff and only letting in the good things. There's no way to guarantee that, right? And when we evaluate existing homes, sometimes it's almost too easy to find it. We go into basement areas where in the rim joist assembly where framing meets foundation, and you can just pull out bats of insulation tucked into the rim joist, and it look like dirty cigarette filters. Air intruding from the garage, air intruding from just the rim joist, and that's the particulate, right? Making the insulation look dirty. Then you see the pests. Right, the pests like to come in from those low areas, whether they be bugs that are just kind of hiding in your house seasonally because your house looks more hospitable than a rotten log out in the yard. They'd rather live up behind your siding or in your box sills. And then if it's a big enough gap, now it's mice and other critters that are finding their way in. If you ever look around your basement rim joist and you see little holes in the insulation, like somebody poked a finger or poked a broomstick into there, you might have mice, right? Yeah. And again, come winter time, it's this time of year, if you haven't made your house pest free, they're probably ready in here for the winter time, stacking up those little maple seeds and acorns and all kinds of different little bits of food. They'll have a food stash in one part of the basement rim joist, and they'll have a little house and nursery in another part of the rim joist. So yeah, all those gaps and holes. I mean, besides the dust, the pests are coming in.
Yeah, and again, you get bigger. All of a sudden, you're now talking raccoons and everything else because things create nice little warmy, cozy spots for them. So, and I mean, that's the thing too, is we all kind of grew up thinking that spiders are a good thing, and it actually, the only good thing about spiders is when you're doing your mid-construction tests and you can see the spider webs flipping around when you're doing your test. That's a good thing when you're doing. Otherwise, we don't need bugs. We don't need spiders in our homes. We want to be able to enjoy those lovely spaces.
John, you're just using those poor spiders in the interim because they're all going to be evicted from that house, come
Exactly.
final cleanup. But yes, in the interim, where there's spider webs, there is airflow and pest movement, because they're not suckers, man. They're not building their webs in areas where they're not going to be productive, catches of bugs. So yeah, spider webs are a really good tell about where you've got air drafts.
Yeah, and if
I'd
we
like
kind of change the conversation, just dealing with moisture and odors. I mean, we talk about a home does need to breathe, but it needs to breathe through a fresh air machine that's taking away all the having filters and all the right devices in that machine. Where again, we've got a sealed box, gonna have that cocoon, and we've got this either HRV or ERV that's providing us filtered fresh air, and again, getting rid of the humidity from our shower, bathrooms, kitchens, and then providing us with filtered fresh air. And so, yeah, I mean, we know what the equipment is. We just got to keep fighting the good fight and getting people to put them in. And of course, we know we're lucky where we've got a lot of codes that are changing. And so we're getting on board. I mean, I'm lucky with the step code here in Vancouver and BC, and the tier codes coming to the rest of Canada. So the terms that we're going to be doing, it's all going to be code. We were just at a conference where for you guys, ASHRAE is adopting Passivhaus principles and putting in the code. So it's coming.
When you're acquiring a building or going to be moving into or using a space, when we're talking about all these things, we also hope that you're assessing what the building's telling you. So this whole dust and bug and critter thing, it might be as simple as the entrances being affixed with some proper weather stripping, right? Which is also going to concurrently help with this magic thing called water that finds a way of destroying things in and out. So you'll be able to check off a couple boxes at once with each of these things. And then some buildings actually don't have the traditional heating, cooling, or ventilation systems. They might have a giant fired boiler, right? And so those penetrations are different, but also you'll have to substitute the way that you're cleaning that air, because there's no filter that hasn't been removed or checked in a very long time, right? There's just large appliances, and then those critters end up getting close to them. And I tell you, these existing buildings, when you end up opening the drywall or ended up opening a ways into the joist spaces, or if there's a drop down ceiling, right? You can open up one of those panels. You're going to see remnants of a whole bunch of action going on there. They know exactly where to find something to eat, something to breathe, something to drink, right? They have a whole landscape up there that they behave in. So it's pretty amazing, the collection that happens in those spots.
Well, the little ecosystems that get built up in there. It's, again, you're creating, the term is harborage, right? You're giving them a safe place for them to live, where there's, few predators. They have shelter. They have, they're shielded from the extreme weather and elements, and they can step out whenever they, need to, find some water or a snack. If they find it in your house, well, then they're never leaving. Yeah. And you have to put them out. So it's not so bad if they're just kind of holding up, for the winter time. But once they find, the fact that you keep trash under your sink, yeah, they're going to start families under your cabinets. We've seen some pretty ridiculous situations, and it all starts with unnecessary holes in the building enclosure, right? That's, you know, again, my wall assemblies don't need to breathe. You know, my floor assembly doesn't need to breathe. I need to breathe. And so we need to have some mechanical fresh air exchange. Otherwise, that box needs to be tight, you know, well insulated, airtight, you know, one vapor, you know, tight layer and the assembly. But you know, it needs to be tight. There's no good reason to be leaving, you know, gaps, cracks, holes. They're going to be, you know, letting bad stuff in, letting good stuff out. You know, we need to control the our environment. If it's a controlled environment, so let's control it.
Well, Mark and Joe, that is another great episode, another discussion about keeping wild things on the outside and having no unwanted moisture and odors. Another true benefit of high performance buildings. We'll see you all again on Offsite Dirt and High Performance Builds.